Hello, everyone. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. The Hey Chaplain podcast brings you stories and wisdom about life in law enforcement, giving support and encouragement to those who wear the badge. Today, I'm talking to Ginger Howell. Ginger was a police chaplain with the Harris County, Texas Sheriff's Office and experienced the line-of-duty deaths of multiple coworkers, which led to her involvement with Concerns of Police Survivors. Concerns of Police Survivors, or C.O.P.S, is an organization that provides crucial support to family members of those killed in the line of duty. Ginger continued that important work when she moved from the state of Texas, now serving as a chaplain with the C.O.P.S chapter in northern Nevada. I wanted to ask her about some of the services that C.O.P.S provides, including retreats for survivors and support for families of the victim during a murder trial. Listen closely. She is a veteran police chaplain and a passionate advocate for concerns of police survivors. Here's Ginger Howell.
Hello.
Hello, Ginger. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Tell me how you got started as a chaplain.
I had been in some kind of form of ministry since 1991. I started out as a Stevens minister. I was with the Methodist Church at the time, and our church had a program where, if you're familiar with Stevens ministry, what they are is they're lay people who come in alongside a pastor and do home visitations, do counseling. If someone's lost a loved one, if someone is dealing with grief or depression, those sort of things, or if it's just a shut-in that needs communion served to them, then we help the pastor with that. So that's how I kind of began. And a lot of those same skills in Stevens ministry are what, fast forward years later, I used when I became an ordained chaplain.
Yeah, it kind of gave you the experience of counseling people in crisis and grief and that kind of thing. So you had that experience going into chaplaincy. How did you initially become a chaplain?
I had been volunteering with a community emergency response team, which is CERT, and I was a CERT instructor. I was doing a lot of things with our Office of Emergency Management in Houston. And through them, I saw advertisement for a training coming up for chaplaincy. And so I was kind of intrigued and interested in it. So I decided to go ahead and take the training. I was very glad that I did so. And like I said, it was just building on the skills that I had already been using in all those years of ministry. I was very active in all my churches. I was with the women's ministry. I taught Bible studies. I did all kinds of things. So chaplaincy was just kind of formalizing the life skills that I had already been building on.
Okay.
And soon after that, they had an opening for the Harris County Sheriff's Office for chaplains. And they were just starting a program. It was brand new to them. And a sergeant who was a chaplain and then a major who was also a chaplain were the ones that were leading kind of the charge to bring chaplains into the department.
Okay. Now, Harris County Sheriff's Office, that's Houston, Texas, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's the third largest in the United States.
Yeah, I knew it was really big. Do you know how many employees approximately?
4,000-ish.
Okay.
And about 2,700 of those are sworn, and then the rest are civilian employees.
Okay. And did you have law enforcement in your family, or what was your connection to law enforcement before this?
My mom was a dispatcher for the Wichita Police Department many years ago. So I kind of grew up with a love of law enforcement just because my mom had a great love of it. And I guess just being in CERT and doing some search and rescue stuff with Texas EquiSearch. I was a volunteer for them. I saw police on scenes that we were on, and that's about the only experience that I had with police before joining the sheriff's office.
Okay. What did the chaplains do in that program for Harris County?
So initially, when I joined the program, all they did was ride-alongs and death notifications. We were kind of hired out to the medical examiner's office in Houston. And so whenever they had a death notification, they would use the Harris County Sheriff's chaplains as the ones to go with a deputy to make notification.
Sure.
So the deputy didn't have to do that. They were just there for our safety.
Right. Yeah,
so we did
that's a big
ride-alongs,
thing for me. I really believe that, of all the stressful things that officers need to do, boy, we can use chaplains to do death notifications. I had a death notification just the other day, and I had an officer with me, and provide security and safety and that kind of thing. But let me make the first contact and break the news and console the family and do all that. Our officers have enough on their plate already, in my opinion. And so, yeah. So, what else did the chaplains do, or how did that evolve?
Well, that evolved. I was with the program for about 6 months, and the chaplain that was leading the program at the time was also doing work with FEMA.
Okay.
And he was a FEMA chaplain. He got paid to go out and do things, and it seemed like that season it was one disaster after another,
Sure.
And so he was gone all the time. So the sergeant that was kind of overseeing the program asked if I would take over the program and be the chaplain coordinator.
Oh, wow.
And surprise, because I was always the idea girl. I was always the one, well, what about this? And have we tried that? And so he finally said, here, go ahead and try things. So when I took over the program, we expanded it from just ride-alongs of death notifications to also visiting dispatch.
Yes.
And talking to our dispatchers, because they're kind of the redheaded stepchild of the department, as they say.
Sure.
They feel pretty much forgotten, that nobody's taking care of them. So we had chaplains that would go in there weekly on different shifts. We had 3 different shifts, and we had a chaplain for each shift.
Oh, fantastic.
That would go in there. Yeah, or they could call us in on a very critical call, and then we would go console the dispatcher who took that call.
Right.
So we did that. We learned critical incident stress management skills, and so we would sit and help with debriefs, because we finally started doing debriefs, and then we would also go visit deputies that were injured in the hospital, and then lastly we would do and help with funerals and line of duty funerals in particular.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now, with the department that large, unfortunately, that means a lot of officers in danger, and there's going to be deaths and suicides over time. Can you tell me what your experience was like there with Harris County?
We had not had a line of duty death since 2010. And then in 2014, we had a line of duty death with Deputy Jesse Valdez. In fact, his end of watch is coming up October 29th, so it's later on this week is his end of watch. He was killed in 2014 by a gal that was high on meth. And so I was assigned to the family the very next morning. I was at their house and was with the family all through the, funeral arrangements and just the whole, they're having to file for benefits and all kinds of things. And so that was one, but in the years that went by, I had been through 7 line of duties.
Oh, wow.
Since 2014. 2 of them were very, very good friend of mine. One that was one of the more recent ones was Sandeep Dhaliwal. He was killed in 2019 on September 27th. And he happened to be a very, very good friend of mine, and I still miss him terribly.
You told me before that you did ride-alongs with him. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, and he was in one of the same districts that I tried to ride with as many deputies as I could, but when you have hundreds per district, it's kind of hard to be with some persons.
Yeah. Sure.
You'll never get everybody, especially night shift. But he was one that if I wasn't riding with him, then I at least ran into him at scenes or saw him at roll call. And,
sure.
He'd always invite me to family functions and stuff. And he was just a great, great guy.
Wow. Okay. So you have quite a bit of experience, really, with a large department with multiple deaths. Tell me about Concerns of Police Survivors. That organization helps in those regards. When did you first become aware of that organization, C.O.P.S?
Well, I became aware when we had the first line of duty that I was assigned to in 2014 with Jesse Valdez. The Greater Houston chapter president, Carol Lane, we would have meetings with her to talk about the filing for the benefits and the National Police Week memorials that were coming up, and, all the services that were available to them. They have counseling available for kids. And so they were making that available because there was a young child involved, a survivor for Jesse. And so they help with counseling programs. They had kids and teen programs, and they gave information on the death benefits. They provide educational assistance. And there's so many things that they did that I wasn't aware of. And so they really came alongside our department and helped with a lot of those kind of details that our department, I wouldn't say isn't aware of, but that's not their expertise.
Right. Well, tell me what C.O.P.S does. Concerns of Police Survivors provides all kinds of support, both short-term and long-term. Can you just name a few of those things?
Yeah, sure. One of the biggest things they do is they make and it's really the department's responsibility, but they make the department aware of the death benefits that are available to the survivors. And a lot of survivors don't even know these things exist, or that there's a deadline in when you have to apply for them.
Yeah.
So there's a funeral benefits, and there's all kinds of follow-up things that Concerns of Police Survivors does. They have a national conference, which actually is coming up in November. I'm going to in Oklahoma City. I just got back from Police Week, which was moved from May to October, in which they honored 701 line of duty names, put the names on the wall and called the names out at both the vigil and the memorial. So C.O.P.S really has a big hand in that. C.O.P.S also provides retreats for the survivors. So whether they be a coworker, whether they be a spouse or a parent, or the children, or significant other like a fiance, or parents or siblings, they have a retreat for each and every one of those categories, which is incredible and wonderful.
And it's a separate retreat for each category?
A separate retreat for each one.
And tell me, what's the advantage of that?
The advantage of that is, like on our board of directors for the Northern Nevada chapter of C.O.P.S is made up of 2 adult children survivors where they lost their dad's line of duty, a spouse who lost her husband, and then 2 coworkers, me and the treasurer. So for me, I can kind of relate to a spouse that has lost someone line of duty, but not exactly, because my husband's still alive. We've been married 35 years. I haven't lost him. But it really helps coming alongside with another spouse, if that's your group, that also has lost her husband line of duty, and what she went through and what she experienced and all that. Or with coworkers. So the coworkers retreat, we had 80 coworkers come from all over the United States, from Alaska to Florida. And we met in Missouri, and we were able to share stories about how our coworker died. And then at the retreat, they also have breakout sessions that are more like officer wellness, how to take care of yourself, how to deal with trauma, what are the stages of grief, that kind of information stuff. And then they also do fun stuff like ceramics and horseback riding and fishing on a pontoon boat. So it's not all doom and gloom.
Yeah, there's counseling if you need it, but there's also fun things. Yeah. Fantastic. So you mentioned Nevada. Now, at some point you retired and left Texas and went to Nevada. So how did you get restarted with Concerns of Police Survivors out there?
Okay. So I left in 2017, left Texas. My husband is a Nevada boy. He grew up here. And when we were looking where to retire, he wanted the mountains. He's a mountain lover. And so we looked at Colorado, Montana, all these other states, but it kept coming back to Nevada. And so we had lived here before many, many years ago and then moved to Texas. So it was a matter of us moving back to some place that was familiar.
Sure.
And so one day at church, and I had no idea of getting hooked up with law enforcement. I didn't really want to be a department chaplain anymore. I was kind of on the verge of burnout.
Okay.
Because of years and years of being on call 24 hours a day. And then when I was the coordinator, I had 50 chaplains under me that I trained, mentored, supervised, and, watched their activities. So I was just in this kind of, like I said, burnout state, didn't really want to do anything. And so I was at church one day, and a surviving spouse, her husband had been killed line of duty here in Nevada, found out that I was a police chaplain, and she said, hey, and, I'd love to have coffee with you. So I had coffee with her, and we talked about things. And she happened to be the secretary for Concerns of Police Survivors here, this chapter. And so she said, we would really love to have a chaplain on our board of directors to kind of help with grief and that sort of thing. And so I thought, well, okay, I can do that much, So
rope you back in. That's right.
Rope me back in little by little, So we were fortunate the first 3 years. I joined in 2018. Then the first couple of years, we didn't have any line of duty, so it was basically training and education. I have a PowerPoint that I give on how agency can set up procedures for a line of duty death in their department. What would they go through? What would they need? So I went around teaching a lot and giving presentations. I also have a mental health for dispatch presentation that I present to dispatch centers, and fundraising. We do fundraising so we can send people to trainings and these retreats, so the survivors don't have to pay their travel to the retreats. Our chapter picks up that cost. Yeah. And so then we had a line of duty in 2020. And so it was all hands on deck. Let's, scramble and figure this thing out and come alongside the family and provide that resource that they needed.
With the Concerns of Police Survivors, I became familiar with them just in recent years and have been fascinated by the work they do. And I mean, once you're aware of it, it's like, wow, how could we have ever functioned without an organization like this to come alongside and walk families through the grief process and beyond? Because, I mean, really, with any death in the community, law enforcement or otherwise, people at the funeral tend to move on. That the funeral's permission for everybody outside of the immediate family to move on with their lives. But the immediate family continues to live in that nightmare. And
they do.
Yeah, so they, I mean, over the next calendar year, they're going to pass a birthday and holidays and all these other things, and there's a lot of other ongoing factors that Concerns of Police Survivors does a great job coming alongside and helping in the long term, when really everybody else has kind of gone home and they're attending to other things. And one facet specifically that I was really interested in was trial support, because I didn't know anything about that. And you've gone through that recently. And so can you kind of walk me through what it looks like to help a surviving family through the trial of the person who took their family member's life?
I learned how to do that in Harris County when we had the trial for Jesse Valdez, the gal that killed him. I was with the family. We had a 2-week trial every single day, Wow. So I was with the family from actually picking them up at their house, getting them to the courthouse, getting them through the line of people going in the building, making sure the media didn't shove microphones in their faces and that sort of thing, sitting with them in the courtroom, walking them to the bathroom. So once again, they didn't get attacked by media, trying to catch them at just out of the blue. So I kind of learned that through that trial. So then here recently, when we had a trial for our sentencing for a line of duty, it was that kind of similar thing of coming on board with the family, talking to them about how to prepare for trial. We had a wonderful presentation by one of our psychologists that's with Concerns of Police Survivors. She gave a wonderful PowerPoint on what are the crime victim rights? What right do you have? And so one of the survivors and I both went through that PowerPoint together. And so she had a lot of that information, but also the victim impact statement, because that is an extremely emotional, burdensome thing to explain to somebody how this impacted their life.
So describe what that is. Describe what a victim impact statement is. What is it, and when is it used in the court, in the hearings and the process of convicting somebody? How's that used?
Okay, it's usually used at the sentencing phase.
Okay.
And it's written or oral information about what impact the crime had on the victim and the victim's family. And every state allows some form of victim impact information prior to after sentencing. So it's right around that sentencing time.
And it's being read to the judge or to the jury or both? Or
both.
Okay.
Both. And if you're in a plea deal type thing where you don't have a jury, then it's read straight to the judge.
Okay.
And so when these guys have to write these, it brings up all these emotions and grief and loss and stuff.
How are you able to help that family member there?
It was just being in the courtroom with her. She came back from giving that impact statement to the whole courtroom, and I was sitting right behind her, and I could just see that look on her face. She just needed a hug really bad after that.
Yeah.
So just that ministry of presence, also just being there.
Do you recommend that families go to the trial? Is that something that you think is useful, or how do you discern if maybe a family shouldn't be there a particular day?
That kind of depends on the family, and that's the importance of getting to know, as a chaplain, getting to know the family members.
Okay.
Because in the Jesse Valdez trial, we had some evidence that was going to be presented that was extremely tragic and emotionally upsetting to the family members. And we had the option where we could tell them in advance, okay, and the prosecution did a really great job in that too. We were blessed with the people that we had. But they warned them, there's going to be some
graphic
crash
detail
scenes, that you don't want to see. So I think it's important for a family to have some kind of way out if they don't want to watch that part of it, that, they have another little separate room that they could go to just for that one part of the trial. They don't have to be gone for the whole part, the whole thing, but just be aware of something that once you see it, it can't be unseen.
Yeah.
And so just to warn the family and say, hey, I'll go sit in the thing with you, we'll be okay. And so having that option, and just if you have small children, how to prepare them for it. I don't think small children should sit through a trial like that.
Okay.
For one thing, they fidget and it's kind of boring to them, but at the same time, it could be something really tragic that they don't need to see.
We're not wanting to re-traumatize anybody. Yeah. Let me ask about that, though. What impact do you think going to trial has on the family members? Do they get closure out of it?
They do if the sentencing goes the way that they want it to.
Okay.
Luckily, with the Jesse Valdez trial, the gal that killed Jesse was sentenced to 60 years. 30 of those years are without parole. She has no chance of parole for the first 30 years. And so she'll be in there for a long, long time. The sentencing with the family that I just dealt with recently, the guy got life in prison with no parole.
Okay.
For killing their loved ones. So it's like it brings closure when you have that knowledge that this person will never get out and hurt another human being, that nobody else will have to suffer the same way this family has suffered.
So in theory, the family being there, that they have an effect on the jury, presumably, and that helps the prosecution. And then the family would then benefit from seeing some closure and maybe getting some information, as long as everyone's wise and careful about that, but they could get some information and maybe get some closure on that also.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. One of the wonderful things about C.O.P.S is it's not just for survivors, it's also for current law enforcement. And they do this through the Traumas in Law Enforcement conferences, presentations that they give. They give, I believe, 6 to 9 a year, and they're in different locations every year.
Okay.
So they usually do them by region. And so the Traumas in Law Enforcement conferences are just that. They're talking about, finally, we're getting this out in the open. You know, what is the effect of these calls on law enforcement? How can you keep yourself emotionally and mentally healthy? And what are the things that police officers need to consider in their departments, how to start a peer support team and things like that. So I think that's the other part of Concerns of Police Survivors that's wonderful, is not only do they take care of the surviving family members and coworkers, but they also try to provide information for current law enforcement to just be a better cop.
Yeah. Now, you were in a very large department in Texas, and when you went to Nevada, I assume you probably have a mix of larger and smaller departments that you interact with. Is Concerns of Police Survivors something that can help small departments? I'm thinking small rural towns with very limited
absolutely.
manpower.
Yeah, so what I've taken on is, as I said before, I do trainings, and one of them is the line of duty presentation. So I went out to rural Nevada on the east side of the state. The towns there are very, very small. The two biggest towns in our state, of course, are Las Vegas and Reno. And then the little towns tend to be forgotten, you know, because they have maybe 100 or 50 people on their force, and that's it. And so we, as a board, decided we were going to try and, you know, build those relationships with our rural agencies. For Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, which is January 9th, we always make it a point to go out to the smaller agencies and bring them cookies and bring them treats and tell them how much they're appreciated and that kind of a thing. So we really have, in the last couple of years, tried to make an effort to be in touch with them, because they need the help and support too. But unfortunately, a lot of them are so short-handed that they can't afford to just send their people to trainings and stuff. So we need to make the trainings come to them.
Right. And line of duty deaths, even though everyone is aware that it can happen and they're aware it happens other places, it's probably a pretty easy thing for a department to not invest in if they've not had one recently. Kind of let the preparations for that kind of lapse and maybe not be as tuned in to what's necessary there as you are with all the other pressing things that a department needs to worry about. And so yeah, having some of that preparation in advance seems to be something that
sure helps a lot. Where you can, you can pull out a sheet and go, okay, we need to establish a family liaison. We need to look at a funeral team. What are the needs of, you know, traffic control are we going to need for the funeral? All that should be laid out in that, you know, thing that the department develops for them themselves. And you can have it for a big department or little department, it doesn't matter, but kind of the framework is the same.
Yeah, the framework is scalable, whether it's a department of 20 individuals or 200 or 2,000, right?
Right, but it's easier to have that already in place and not being, you know, scrambled at the last minute, because you're also dealing with shock.
Oh, yes.
You're dealing with grief. Your partner, your coworker has died, somebody that you knew, perhaps your kids both went to baseball games together or whatever, and smaller agencies are really close-knit. So you don't want to have to be trying to get information in place the same time you're dealing with your own personal grief of losing a coworker.
Absolutely. Ginger, thank you for discussing C.O.P.S with me today and kind of talking to me about the trial support and all those other issues. I really appreciate that.
Sure. And I think C.O.P.S is a wonderful organization, and more departments, more chaplains need to even get involved with it. So thank you for asking the questions, and I'm willing to help anybody that's got any questions themselves. They do have a website I'm sure you'll provide. So
absolutely,
there's all kinds of materials they can download off the website. So just go on and explore it and find out what Concerns of Police Survivors is all about.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm so thankful for Ginger Howell sharing her experience as a police chaplain and as part of Concerns of Police Survivors. Something she pointed out to me that people often misunderstand is that C.O.P.S doesn't get any kind of government funding. It's a nonprofit. It survives on fundraising and donations. If you want to help them do the work that they do, please consider donating to them. The national organization and the local chapters that I mentioned in this episode are all linked in the show notes. And if you're a chaplain listening to this episode, I know this wasn't the main focus of the interview, but did you catch how she directed chaplains in Houston to go in and spend time with dispatch on a regular schedule? That's fantastic. I'm guessing that most communication centers get very little attention of this kind, and our dispatchers need the attention and the care, just like the rest of the law enforcement family. Also notice what she said about the resources that C.O.P.S provides to departments of all sizes to prepare for a line of duty death. Though we pray that this never happens, having the mechanisms already in place is crucial to responding well. If you're in a small department, please take steps now to set up the basic components you'll need if tragedy strikes. Hopefully, you'll never have to use it. This was the second episode I've done about Concerns of Police Survivors. If you'd like to hear more about how Concerns of Police Survivors has ministered to survivors in the states of Washington and Kansas, then listen to episode 009 of the Hey Chaplain podcast. It's titled Line of Duty Death and was published in September of 2021. And stay tuned, I have more episodes planned to talk about the work Concerns of Police Survivors does in other states. If you liked what you heard here, please share this episode with a cop or someone who loves a cop. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the Justice, Prisoner, and Alien Transportation Service, otherwise nicknamed JPATS, or as they like to be referred to, Con Air.
Right.
Because when prisoners are sentenced, then they may, and let's say they're going to be assigned to the Bureau of Prisons facility somewhere. Well, we have to get them there.
Yeah.
And the easiest way to get them from here to someplace far away is to fly them on the only government-operated on-time airline that the United States government operates is the JPATS airlift, or otherwise known as the Con Air.
The views expressed here are the personal views of the hosts and our guests and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. Thank you for listening today, and as always, pray for peace in our city.